Ilara Voss adjusted her visor, scanning the horizon of the planet Valaran 3. The thick canopy overhead cast a dim green light across the ground, turning the entire jungle into a surreal twilight. The air was thick and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and the faint metallic tang of alien plant life. Ilara's team was scattered around her, each member moving carefully through the dense underbrush, their armor blending into the foliage. "This place is giving me the creeps," came Private Marsh's voice over the comm. "I keep thinking, I see something moving out there." "Stay sharp," Ilara replied, her voice steady and calm. "We're just here to survey. No hostiles reported, remember?" Still, her hand hovered closer to her sidearm. Something felt off. The silence of the forest was too complete, the usual insect-like drones or animal calls absent. Even the rustling leaves seemed muted, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. Ilara forced herself to focus. She was the team lead, and it was her responsibility to keep everyone level-headed. They pressed deeper into the jungle. The undergrowth thickened, forcing the soldiers to slow their pace. Ilara checked her scanner again, watching for any signs of movement. The device was silent, but her instincts refused to settle. She heard faint whispers, nothing on the comms, just on the edges of her hearing, like the wind weaving through the trees. When she turned to ask the others if they heard it too, she froze. A glint of light off something metallic. Not a human-made structure, not something on their mission brief. Her visor enhanced the image, an oblong, shimmering construct half buried in the jungle floor, its surface pulsating faintly. It was organic-looking, like a giant cocoon of steel and liquid light. "Eyes up," she murmured. "I've got something." The others moved to join her. They approached cautiously, weapons at the ready. Private Marsh muttered, "What the hell is that thing?" Ilara's heartbeat quickened. Command said no known hostiles. Could be an old probe or something else. "Keep your distance." Just as she was about to call in the find, something moved. No, several somethings. From the shadows emerged creatures taller than any human, their bodies lithe and angular, draped in armor that seemed to flow like liquid glass. Their faces were featureless except for a pair of silvery reflective eyes that gleamed in the dim light. Ilara didn't need a translator to read their intent. These weren't scouts or curious onlookers. They were predators. "Contact!" Ilara barked, raising her rifle. The jungle erupted into chaos. Marsh and two others fired, the sudden light from their weapons illuminating the scene in staccato bursts. The alien figures moved with inhuman speed, dodging and weaving through the undergrowth. Ilara took aim and fired off several bursts, the round striking one of the creatures squarely in the chest. It stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, it raised an arm and a sharp, organic-looking weapon unfolded from its wrist. Before Ilara could react, a needle-thin dart shot out, striking her just below the shoulder joint. The pain was immediate, a fiery sting that spread like liquid ice through her veins. Her hand went limp, her weapon falling to the ground. The world around her wavered as the poison took hold. She tried to yell, to warn the others, but her voice came out as a choked whisper. The last thing she saw before her vision blurred completely was one of the creatures looming over her, its silvery eyes gazing down with what could only be described. Ilara drifted through a haze of fractured memories. It wasn't like any dream she'd ever experienced before. Everything was sharp, yet fluid, shifting without warning. Faces and places flowing together into a disjointed mosaic. At first, the images were familiar. She saw herself as a child running through the forests back on Earth, her little brother laughing as he tried to keep up. The green trees seemed brighter than they ever had in real life, their leaves shimmering as though lit from within. She reached for one, but it crumbled into sand. The scene changed. Now she was older, standing on the Martian training grounds. The air smelled faintly of dust and iron. She could feel the pull of the planet's weaker gravity as she sprinted across the rugged terrain, the weight of her armor like a second skin. Her instructors shouted commands and her squad mates called out encouragement, their voices distant yet vivid. Then, just as she rounded a hill, the sky above split open. The Martian sun became a silver void and shadows poured from it, twisting as they descended. The shadows took on the shape of the aliens she had encountered, those tall, glass-like beings with their gleaming, soulless eyes. They stood in formation, their arms raised. Ilara couldn't move, couldn't reach her weapon. As she struggled, she noticed something strange. She could hear their voices. Not through the comms, not through any translator, but directly in her mind. Their words were a blend of harsh tones and ethereal murmurs, forming ideas she could somehow understand. They were strategizing, planning. She saw flashes of their camp, bright pulsating structures nestled within the jungle. She saw their command center, their power cores, their supply routes. The alien voices didn't just narrate these details, they revealed weaknesses. They talked about blind spots, the vulnerable spots in their perimeter, the slow recharge time of their energy shields. It was as though they were unconsciously broadcasting their secrets directly into her dreaming mind. Another shift. The jungle returned, but now she was watching from above as if through their own eyes. She saw her team scrambling through the underbrush, unaware of the danger closing in. The aliens moved like liquid shadows, silent and fast. She felt their anticipation, their hunger. The sensation was sickening, and yet it held her in place. Ilara tried to wake up. She tried to force her body to move, to drag herself out of the nightmare. But the dream tightened its grip. The whispers grew louder, a chaotic symphony of alien thought that seemed both random and deliberate. She knows. One voice hissed. She sees. Another murmured. They weren't speaking to her. They were speaking about her. The realization was chilling. The poison had done something to her mind, opening a channel she couldn't shut off. She wasn't just dreaming. She was eavesdropping, an unwitting spy trapped in her own poisoned body. The alien voices grew louder still, their plans spilling over each other in an unintelligible roar. Then suddenly silence. Ilara gasped, her body jolting as though electrified. The forest faded, the shadows receded, and her own thoughts returned, but the memories lingered. She could still see the map of the alien camp etched into her mind. She could still feel the pulse of their energy cores, the rhythm of their patrols. When she finally opened her eyes, she knew two things. Ilara's eyes fluttered open, the world around her swaying like a ship adrift on a stormy sea. The jungle canopy loomed above, its dense foliage breaking the sunlight into fractured, wavering patterns. She tried to sit up, but immediately collapsed, back down, her muscles weak and unresponsive. Every nerve in her body felt as though it had been soaked in acid. For a moment, she thought she might still be dreaming. She blinked hard, forcing herself to focus. Her hands rested in damp soil, fingers clawing at the soft earth. She could feel the gritty texture, the cold dampness seeping through her gloves. It was real, too real to be a dream. Pain blossomed in her shoulder where the dart had struck, and as she gingerly touched the wound, she winced. Her armor's internal medic pack had likely slowed the venom's progress, but it hadn't been able to neutralize it completely. The fact that she was still breathing meant she'd outlasted its initial effects. Her surroundings were quiet, too quiet. No sounds of her squad, no chatter on the comms, only the distant rustle of leaves in a faint breeze. The silence felt oppressive, and a weight settled in her chest. She was alone. She'd been separated from her team in the chaos, and now she had no idea how much time had passed. Hours, a day, longer. Gritting her teeth, Ilara rolled onto her side and managed to push herself upright. Her head swam, the jungle tilting before her eyes. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. Her gear was gone. No rifle, no pack. All she had was her survival knife still strapped to her thigh and the emergency beacon tucked into her belt pouch. The beacon. If she could get a signal out, Command might be able to pinpoint her location and send backup. She fumbled for it, but then paused. Something felt different. She couldn't explain it at first, but as she leaned back against a mossy tree trunk, the answer became clear. The whispers. They weren't gone. They had faded to the edges of her consciousness, quieter now, more like faint echoes than the overwhelming roar she had heard in her dreams, yet they were still there, subtle and persistent. If she concentrated, she could pick out fragments of thought, alien words and images flitting across her mind. It was disorienting, but there was a strange clarity to it. She could recall their camp, the layout of their defenses, the vulnerable spots. The poison hadn't just tried to kill her. It had done something else, something the aliens hadn't anticipated. It had connected her to them. Her pulse quickened. If she could survive the jungle, if she could make it back to the alien camp, she might be able to use what she'd learned. They thought she was dead. They thought their secrets were still safe. That gave her an advantage, as slim as it might be. The ground felt more solid under her feet as she stood. Every step was a struggle, but Ilara pushed forward. She'd been trained to endure, to adapt. Her team was out there, scattered, captured, or worse. The aliens had tried to break her with their poison, but they'd only given her the tools she needed. They'd poisoned the wrong soldier. She wouldn't waste that chance. The alien camp loomed ahead, tucked into the jungle like a predatory insect lying in wait. Glowing structures pulsed faintly with internal light, their surfaces shifting and gleaming like liquid metal. Even in her weakened state, Ilara felt the hum of their energy, like the heartbeat of the entire camp thrumming through the ground. She crouched in the undergrowth, hidden behind the massive, root-like protrusions of a tree. From here, she could see the entire layout, and though the whispers in her mind had quieted to faint murmurs, the knowledge they had imparted was still vivid. She remembered the weak points, the gaps in the alien patrol routes, the timing of their energy grid recharges, the vulnerable node in their shield generator. Her fingers traced the hilt of her survival knife, her one remaining weapon. She'd fashioned a makeshift spear from a sharpened branch earlier, but it had broken on her way here. Now all she had was the knife, her wits, and the element of surprise. Ilara knew she couldn't go in guns blazing. That wasn't an option, and even if it were, she was in no condition for an extended fight. Instead, she had to be methodical, precise. She observed the movements of the alien patrols, counting their steps and memorizing the intervals between their passes. Her heart hammered as she watched one of the guards, a tall, glass-like figure, pause near a cluster of glowing, organic machinery. The guard's head swiveled as if listening, then moved on, disappearing behind a curve in the terrain. Now. Ilara slipped from her hiding spot, crouching low as she approached the first target, a node that pulsed with a steady rhythm, housed in a structure resembling an oversized alien mushroom. Her knife sliced through the vine-like cables connecting it to a larger hub, and the node's glow sputtered out. The air felt heavier for a moment, as if the camp's energy field hiccuped. She darted back into the shadows before the next patrol came into view. The process repeated. She moved through the camp like a shadow, severing cables, sabotaging energy, conduits and jamming the mechanisms of their glowing, pulsating machinery. Each time she retreated into the jungle before the patrols caught on. Her breathing was ragged. Her shoulder burned where the poison dart had struck, but she kept going. Then she came to the central shield generator, a massive construct that radiated a low, ominous hum. This was the heart of their camp's defenses. If she could take it down, the entire camp would be exposed. She crouched in the underbrush waiting for the last patrol to pass. When it did, she darted forward, her knife slicing through the final power conduit. Sparks flew and the hum stopped. For a moment the camp seemed to falter. Lights dimmed. The glowing structures flickered and the air lost that electrified tension. Alara knew this would alert them. She had maybe seconds before they realized. Their shield was down. She retreated to the tree line, her pulse pounding. The camp was in chaos now, aliens rushing from structure to structure, their silvery forms reflecting the dim jungle light. They were trying to restore power, trying to find the source of the sabotage. Alara allowed herself a faint smile. She'd given them something they didn't expect. As she slipped away, she glanced back at the crumbling camp. It wasn't total destruction, not yet. But it was enough. Enough to even the playing field. Enough to prove to herself that she wasn't just a victim of their poison. She was the survivor who had turned the venom into a weapon, the lone soldier who had brought the fight back to them. She disappeared into the jungle, leaving behind only smoke flickering light. As dawn broke over the jungle, Alara trudged toward higher ground. Her legs felt like iron weights, each step an effort that scraped away what little strength she had left. But the chaos behind her was undeniable proof that her plan had worked. Smoke rose from the alien camp in thick gray columns, mingling with the morning mist. The once gleaming structures now slumped in on themselves, their light dimmed, their hum silenced. The patrols that had haunted her every move had scattered, their coordinated patterns thrown into disarray. Alara leaned against a tree, catching her breath. The poison still lingered in her system, a faint heat that hadn't fully burned out. But for the first time her mind was silent. The whispers that had twisted through her dreams and haunted her waking moments were gone. She couldn't tell, when they'd finally stopped, whether it had been during the last sabotage or when she severed the shield generator's power. But she was certain now. The alien presence in her mind was no longer there. She pulled the emergency beacon from her belt and examined it. The device was scuffed and dirty but still functional. Pressing the activation switch, she heard a faint ping as it sent out a distress signal. Reinforcements would be able to track the beacon, though it might take hours, maybe longer, for them to arrive. For now it was out of her hands. She had done what she could, and all that remained was to hold her ground until help came. Sinking down onto the mossy ground, she allowed herself a moment to reflect. Her team was still missing. She didn't know if they had been captured, killed, or if any of them had managed to escape. The thought weighed heavily on her, though she tried to push it aside. Dwelling on the worst-case scenario wouldn't help her now. She had to survive long enough to find out. Her hand brushed against her survival knife, now dulled and nicked from the night's work. It had been a crude weapon, but it had served its purpose. Everything she had done, every cable she'd cut, every generator she'd disabled, had been a desperate gamble. The aliens had underestimated her. They had taken her for dead. Their poison meant to be the final blow. But instead of killing her, it had handed her the knowledge she needed to fight back. Alara thought of the aliens' silvery eyes, their cruel gazes as they struck down her team. She thought of how they'd made the mistake of poisoning her instead of finishing the job, and now their camp lay in ruins. That, at least, was a small victory, a reminder that they weren't invincible. As the sun rose higher, its light piercing through the jungle canopy, Alara straightened her posture. She wasn't out of danger yet. There was still the possibility of alien patrols searching the area, and the jungle itself was no ally. But she had survived the worst of it. She had outlasted. The poison dismantled the enemy's defenses and remained standing. Her mind was clear, her body battered but still functional. The emergency beacon's faint blinking light reassured her that help was on the way. Until then, she would stay alert, keep moving, and prepare for whatever came next. Ilara Voss was no longer the prey. The whispers had tried to break her, but she'd turned them into her weapon. Now, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, she was ready for the next fight.